bunch of gluten-free and vegan popcorn snacks that are super yummy. So definitely give that a look in the lobby as well. And finally, I'm going to shout out Crystal Guardian and Elliot. He's doing custom earplug fittings in the lobby as well. And he's going to be back here in July doing his own pop-up with us as well. So if you guys missed out on that, or you want to bring your friends, definitely come back in July. Without getting into it too much, I'll talk a little bit about Sound Collective. We're a community space, and we run courses for anybody trying to learn a little bit more about DJing and music production. If you guys are interested, or you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to ask any of the staff that are around, somebody at the front desk maybe, or check out the website. We do a lot of events and cool stuff in the facility like this. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to AKKI. She's going to do a track breakdown for us, and then we'll get into the panel. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate you all coming.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm AKKI. I'm a DJ, producer, vocalist based in Brooklyn. I'm originally from Sydney, Australia, and also grew up in Singapore. Now I've been based in Brooklyn for a number of years, been DJing and producing in the scene for a few years too. Today, I wanted to talk about my track Culture that just released on Wiggle Room Records. This was a really special release because Wiggle Room Records is actually a Toronto-based label in Canada. So not only did they release a track, but they actually own a nightclub in Toronto, and they flew me to Toronto to do a release party. So that was really exciting. It was my first time doing one of those. The track compilation also had remixes from Nicole Fialo and Junior Lopez, if anyone knows any of those artists as well. And it also just hit number 2 on Beatport on a genre chart. So that was really exciting because it was the first track that really charted for me. So it was like really special. Today, I'm going to talk about a few of the production tricks and the creative process I used for this track. You'll probably notice that nothing I'm about to share here is particularly complicated, and that's just by design. I really believe in just the simplicity of production and the accessibility of production, and a lot of what I want to talk about is like my creative process and like the arrangement and the inspiration for the track, but also going into some production techniques and details. So first, let me play a little bit of the track so you get a feel for it. So that's basically how the track goes. First, I wanted to talk about some of the origin story of like how I even came up with the idea of like, this is for the culture. And basically, I wanted to share this because I think it's a really cool story. I was about 2 years ago playing a pop-up party on the Williamsburg Bridge that a friend of mine organized. And it was an all-female lineup. And it was a really cool event. It was on like a Wednesday evening. And it was just like a bunch of us just crowded there and just like playing on the Williamsburg Bridge. And it just really rejuvenated me and just made me realize like why I was in the scene in the first place. And that's how I came up with the vocal concept of like, this is for the culture. So it really started as like more of a feeling before it became a lyric. And I've definitely been more of a vocalist before I was a producer, just like writing lyrics a lot. So this is just like one of the many lyrics that I came up with. So that was kind of how I came up with the lead vocal. But in terms of the rhythm itself, if you notice, the rhythm goes like this. And then if I mute the hi-hats and the clap, you'll notice the very basic fundamental genesis of the rhythm is like conga drums. So I grew up with listening to a lot of different types of music. I performed in like a Latin Caribbean dance team in college, and I was exposed to, again, a lot of different types of music. And this rhythm was actually inspired by an old rhythm called Coolie dance rhythm. I'm sure you've heard about it, but I just want to play the original sample. Who's heard that sample before, like recognizes it? Yeah, everyone. Okay. So it's like Nina Sky, Move Your Body, use that sample, like Pitbull, use that sample. So it's like a pretty well-known sample that, and like the rhythm itself is like used in a number of different tracks. So at first because I love that rhythm so much, I tried to sample it directly and it just wasn't really cutting it for me. It just like wasn't really translating very well. So I decided to create it myself. So as you can see here, the way I really did that were these like basic conga drums. I was basically just using the same sample and just like tuning it differently. Let me just like solo that quickly. So that was basically how I came up with that. And then honestly, the rest of the percussion was pretty basic, and that's just by design. Like the percussion is supposed to be the most driving element of this track, and I just want the rhythm to feel very just like accessible and just not too overloaded. So I used claps and hi-hats, and honestly, that was pretty much it for the percussion. For the hi-hats, I honestly just used the 909 hi-hats that I find the 909 Ableton stock hi-hats just like pretty good. Even when I'm just writing a track, like I try to just, use that as like placeholders when I'm writing. Like I'll just even throw in a 909 kick, a 909 hi-hat, 909 clap, and then I always, can switch it out if you want to. But I feel like when you're just getting an idea done, it's just like such a useful drum kit to use. Is anyone not familiar with a 909? Because I can like explain it quickly. No. Okay, cool. Sorry. I'll try to like break things down a little bit more. So a 909 drum set is basically like a classic house drum set that a lot of legends just like used back in the day, especially. It's a very like analog drum kit, and you still hear it in a lot of house music used today, and it just has like a very classical sound. So and you can find it in Ableton in like the stock drum sets, so you have access to it if you have Ableton, and it still works really well in house tracks. So yeah, that was what I mainly used for the hi-hats, and then I had a 16th hi-hat too. Again, very, very simple. Like this is just like literally my percussion for the most part. And then I did some layering with shakers. That was mainly a sample. So I have this like Tulum drum sample pack that I have. And then I was basically just playing around with the shakers a little bit and just like layering them. So you can see there's like one here, there's one here, there's like another one here. And I love using the shakers as a way to kind of build the energy and then like take it out a bit and like build the tension, take it out a bit. It's just a good way to like progress the track. So as you can see, these are the shakers. I have them in the beginning of the track, and then I take them out in the first drop and then bring them back again. So I think that's just like shakers are just a really effective way to keep the energy going, like add more texture, add more layers. But I think the thing about music production that was really my learning curve for me is just not piling in too much, like just being very selective with what you choose and what you use. I probably should have also started off with just talking about the basic arrangement of the track. So there's the intro, oops. me solo. So the intro just basically is like the conga rhythm with a shaker and like the kick EQ'd out. I tend to do that with a lot of intros. As you can see, it's a very basic kick. There's not much, but I have an EQ here that's just like cutting off the low end for the intro, and then I'll bring it in the actual intro. And then I bring in the bass. And then we have a breakdown. Then I have a big build, the drop, like a second drop, a bit of a cool down, another breakdown, and then like the final drop. So it's not a very complicated arrangement. I think it's pretty similar to the way a lot of house tracks are arranged. With the bass line, for this bass, I actually used a sample, which is something I don't tend to use that often. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, clearly I used it for this track. I tend to generally like creating my own bass lines on Serum or Massive or using a synthesizer like that. But this one, the bass just fits so well, and I found one that was like in tune and actually sounded good. So I did use a sample. I definitely chopped it up a little bit and kind of like rearranged it just to fit the groove that I wanted. But as you can see, it's like pretty basic. Let me play the drop. You probably have to hear it with it. And with the bass itself, like I honestly did not do much because it was pretty good to begin with. I put some fab filter on it just to put some limiter. I used this LFO tool, which basically just adds some movement to the bass line and just a little bit of utility to pump up the volume a little bit. So as I said, like very basic production techniques with a lot of this, like tried not to make anything too complicated. I think the most important thing in production is to make sure that the kick and the bass like really work well together and really add to the groove. So back to the percussion for a little bit. Something else that I really loved doing with this track was I added a bunch of fills, and a lot of them are, again, inspired by a lot of the different music I was exposed to growing up. I was exposed to a lot of like Middle Eastern music, so I love listening to and sampling a lot of Middle Eastern music. This fill, for example, is from a darbuka, and then this fill is actually like a Turkish pop song that I sampled, but you probably wouldn't even be able to tell if I played it for you, so I'm gonna spare you. But yeah, like I just use these around to just like add some texture, and like you can kind of hear it here. Oh, that wasn't a very good example, but I think it's just good to, you know, have little fills here and there, which can really be effective to just show transitions between different moments in a song and just like add some variation, especially because there are so few elements in this percussion. I think, again, it's not about adding too much more, but just about being quite intentional with where you want to add certain sounds. And then that's like a lot of the percussion, really. Something else I wanted to talk about was something I enjoy doing is also doing like a little bit of a rhythm switch up in some of my tracks. It kind of, again, pays homage to my influences outside of house. So in the second breakdown, I do a little bit of a rhythm switch up. So as you can see there, it kind of becomes like, I guess, like a bit of like a Jersey club rhythm. So I really like that, and the way I really did that was just like mixing up the kick rhythm a little bit. Hang on. So it was really not that hard. So it worked really well with like the conga rhythm that I already had going. And then with the final drop, I mean, I'm sure if you listen to a lot of house music, you know that the final drop is really where you have a lot of impact, and like a lot of the song is really building up to that final drop. Um, Honestly, the thing that I did, was just add some rides. I love adding rides. I really love the 909 ride. For this one, I didn't do the 909 ride. I just took a Mark Knight sample. So Mark Knight is another pretty legendary DJ producer from back in the day. He has a lot of drum packs out. I have like some of his old sample packs that I like to pick from. For me, it's always like the older the better. So I just added a ride to the drop. And I felt like that was an effective way to just like really create some impact for the final drop. So again, like nothing that complicated. Another trick I wanted to show is like I have a really easy way to do builds, especially for right before drop. You can kind of hear the build with the percussion here. Oops, I paused it too quick. So there's actually this plugin you can get called Bass Clap, and it's like Easy Washout. I think I just found it, I learned about it on like a YouTube tutorial, and it's really easy. If you just put it on anything, you can pump up the washout and like put it back down. So it's just like that. It's basically like really good for builds, and it like almost feels like a cheat code because I basically just use it on everything. If you just want to instantly just like use the percussion that you already have to make a really big build. Something that I wanted to talk about with this track also that I thought was really interesting is that when I was first shipping this track out to labels, I actually had a synth on it. And I thought for the longest time that this synth was like the main lead of the track. Like I was so attached to it. I actually had gotten feedback from like a pretty big producer that like this is, that's like the most interesting part of the track. So this was the synth line. Hang on. So I was like shipping around to labels and getting some maybes, some rejections, and then one label finally came back to me and was like, we'll sign the track if you change the lead synth. And I was like, really? Like that? What? I was like, that's impossible. I was like, no, this track is meant to be. Like this synth is like meant to be here. And then I remember spending an entire weekend like trying so many different synth sounds, different variations, different options. And then finally I just hit delete. And I tried it that way, and I like sent it around to some friends for feedback, and they were like, yeah, it sounds great without it. And I thought that was super interesting because I think it just taught me that like, sometimes just to be open to the solution, because sometimes like the thing that you think is really working like may not be. But the thing that's so great about music is that, I could always save that synth for another track, or like it's not like I've created that sound, I've spent effort on it. It's not going anywhere. It just wasn't meant to be for this track. And I didn't realize that the star of this track was not supposed to be the synth. It was supposed to be the percussion. Like that was what was really more iconic in this track and was like going to really be, the winner. So I thought that was super interesting. I think it's like, it's up to you what you want to do. Like, I don't think you necessarily have to always follow what a label says. It's always, it's always your creative choice. But I think in this specific case, they were actually right. And I'm glad I listened to them because they were the ones I ended up signing with. So let's go into the vocals. There's two main vocal layers on this track. So first of all, there's my vocals. This for the culture. And then there's also this other vocal from like the original sample, like that coolie rhythm sample that I showed you before. So yeah, I feel like when it comes to processing, I probably did the most on my vocals. Vocal processing is definitely something that I have a lot of fun with. I love learning about. And yeah, again, like a bit more processing on this, but I still don't think it was anything that complicated. So first of all, I have a de-esser on here. As you can probably hear, I say this is for the culture. So the purpose of a de-esser is to especially try to lower some of the noise and the volume when it comes to saying certain consonants, especially S's, because they can sound quite harsh in certain frequencies. So I had that, and then I have some light EQ, and then something that I love messing with is Little Altar Boy. So with Little Altar Boy, you can basically mess with like the formants and like the pitch of a vocal. So let me show you.
This for the culture.
You can make it even more intense.
This for the culture.
I don't know why it's not working. That's weird. Oh, hang on.
This for the culture.
So I wanted to sound a bit more like Mickey Mousey. Or you can make it super low.
This for the culture.
Which is kind of cool, actually. I could have gone with something like that. I chose to just do some like light formant on it. Like you can see the dry wet here isn't even that much. There's also a number of like presets you can use.
This for the culture.
So modern double kind of like layers things. You have like a rock vocal.
This for the culture.
So there's a lot of really cool things that I just love playing with. Let me just like put it back to what it was. So yeah, I like Little Altar Boy. I put some LFO tool on it, which just helps, again, like, you know, add some movement to the vocals. A bit of reverb, just to fill the space, some delay. I used auto filter here just to kind of be able to control the frequency, especially if there's like parts where I'm kind of introducing the vocals or want to fade it out a little bit. Decapitator is always a good one too. I'm a big fan of Sound Toys, which is basically they make a lot of these plugins like Decapitator as well as Little Altar Boy. They have like another plugin called Phase Mistress. I kind of just bought the bundle and I mess around with it a lot. So for this one, I put a Decapitator and I put like an old radio voice on it.
This for the culture.
I'm gonna take it off.
This for the culture.
It's like a little less gritty, but
This for the culture.
so I purposely chose an old radio voice technique because I think the thing about this track was just like really finding the balance and like where different sounds need to live. And I got some feedback that like the percussion should really be the lead and like the vocals need to kind of be, you know, pushed to the back a little bit. And like, I guess I kind of think about it as the main performer and like the support act. So I think the old radio voice kind of gave it that fade out effect and like really helped make the vocals like stand out just enough but not be stealing attention. I also did some very light layering
This for the culture.
with the vocals. Like one vocal layer was just raw, so it had like no processing on it. And then one vocal layer had more of the processing on it. So I kind of like playing around with those layers a little bit. And I think what was also interesting is that I did a lot of takes for this just to say this is for the culture, which is crazy. It's like 5 words, right? Like how many times do you need to say that? But what I liked about that is like I had so many different ways of saying it. So I think I say it like here I say culture, so it's a little different. And then this one, it's like,
This for the culture.
so I was able to just like have a lot of different, you know, ways of saying it, different pitches, different tones. And that was a good way to create variation and, you know, create different cultures. And then I have the sample that I used. So this one, I think the processing wasn't too bad. It wasn't too much either. I have like one layer with like very minimal processing. And then I have another layer using a plugin called Humanoid. So Humanoid is interesting. You gotta be a little careful with it, but it's mainly for vocals. I mean, you could play around with it on other things, but like it basically turns your voice into like different things. That's like a robotic version. So you got to be careful to push it like too far because it just sounds weird. But I think it's good to have as a layer. So sometimes I'll like, again, I do like layering vocals a lot. So sometimes I'll just have the original vocal layer and then have like something that has some cool effects on it, and even just play around with when I'm using the effects, when I'm using the original. And then with the vocals, I also had some chops. So I had some chops from the Indian sample that I used. Yeah, so I wanted to show how I make chops, like vocal chops, because I think it's quite interesting. So what you can do this with any sample, but I do this with vocals a lot, where I'll take a vocal sample and then I'll convert it to MIDI. So if you go here, you can say like slice to new MIDI track, and it will give you a new MIDI track here. So, oops, hang on, I didn't want to go that far yet. So here's like the MIDI track, right? And like you have all the MIDI slices here. So I use this random acid pattern generator called Sting. I think you can just download it online, and I think it's free. I don't remember. I downloaded it years ago. So what I like about it is that you can take a bunch of chops or like a bunch of like slices, and you can create random patterns. So, and all you have to do is like click this smiley face, and it just like changes up the pattern. You have to keep playing around. And then you can basically record that and like create something like what I came up with, which is like very simple. But I also just play around with it to like, hang on. Oh, no, that's what I was doing. Like, it could also just, you know, create like a whole different track. Like, it's just a cool way to get started on something, you know, just like use like a random acid pattern generator. So it was really fun. I play around with that a lot. I also use that sometimes just to like generate a bass line. Like if I have a baseline sound that I want to use and I just want to think of a pattern, you can use it as well to do that. I mean, you can kind of use it on everything. You can use it on like a percussion sample that you just want to play around with, like anything you really find that you just have an urge to get a bit more creative with, you can use that. What else? And then with the FX, like I said, like simplicity was just key for me with this track. I used operator white noise, just like very simple. Some LFO to, again, give it some movement, some EQ. I used that bass clef plugin that I talked about to do some builds, just a little bit of echo. Valhalla Supermassive is a good plugin. There's also like a vintage Verb one that a lot of people use. It has like delay presettings, it has reverb presettings, so I quite enjoy that because I feel like so much of production is just experimenting and setting aside the time to just like play around, you know, because you never know what you're going to come up with. There's so many happy accidents that happen in this track. And then just very basic rises, honestly. I probably want to get into the habit of like making my own rises a bit more in the future, but for this one I just pulled in a sample. And yeah, I mean, I know we're almost at time. I wanted to leave at least a few minutes for any questions. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The plugins that you're mentioning, will
Yeah.
they work on any program? Will they work on Logic?
On Logic? Typically for the more popular ones, there is like a Logic one. But yeah, it's something I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I wish I was more well-versed in Logic. Yeah. Sorry? They do, okay. From the voice in the back, they do. Anything else? Yeah.
I was wondering, so when you, during the production process and during your different segments, are you counting bars and beats, or do you like just wait till like the feeling passes to move on to the next segment?
That you mean like when I'm first writing a song, like
Yeah.
first creating a song? That's a great question. I tend to not count like bars and beats just yet. I mean, definitely just to get into like a rhythm, like a 4x4 rhythm. But I tend to start by just experimenting with different sounds. Like sometimes I'll hear sounds in songs that I like, and I'll start with just like creating those sounds, and then just like creating like a number of different sounds that I really like coming up with a pattern, and then I might just create like a lot of different segments, but not really think about them as like this is the intro, like this is the breakdown. Like I think the arrangement kind of comes afterwards. So I tend to kind of just experiment a lot, like create like a lot of different, you know, moods and textures, and then kind of come back to it and think about like what to actually include. Oh yeah.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say this was so helpful.
Oh really great.
I struggle with, or I'm getting in, I'm coming from a composer perspective, and I'm
Mm.
getting more and more into producing, and I struggle with vocals just because I'm not a vocalist, and I felt like you gave a lot of really helpful tips with that. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, just keep at it. Honestly, like I've just had to like work at it for like the last few years, and I feel like you'll finally get to a level that you really like.
I guess that is my question, actually.
Yeah, of course.
As you said that, is that this might be silly, but is that just the best way to do it? Just keep practicing it, and just keep messing around with different plugins, and just kind of see how you flow through things? Like,
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if it's better just to practice it, or do a combination of that and like watching YouTube tutorials, or I'm just curious what you think the best practice is to get better at it.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of a few things. I do take some production classes sometimes that I think is really helpful, because I think there's like a lot of tutorials out there, and it's really hard, and a lot of them are like 20 to 30 minutes long, and half the time you don't even know if you're going to get the value that you actually need until you're done watching it. So I like taking production classes with a mentor. Like I do like a one-on-one classes sometimes, and that kind of helps narrow down like what to actually, you know, experiment with. I love watching other track breakdowns by DJs and producers that I respect. So I think that really helps like just put things in context. But there is definitely an element of messing around, especially when you want to find like your own sound. I think it's important to spend a day just like, you know, trying the plugins that you actually get, like see what you like, see what you don't like, because not everything is for everyone, right? So you want to see what works for you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's, and then the last thing, I think collaborating with friends. I think I've just learned so much from just like collaborating with people, and just like seeing the types of techniques other people use on vocals, for example. I think there's so much you can learn, and it kind of takes you out of your own bubble. So, yeah. Yeah, of course. Right? Oh, yeah, go for it.
Do you mix and master your own tracks, and do you do it all in one session? Like, how did you do it for this track?
I do mix my own tracks. I don't master my own tracks. I generally, actually for this one, I find a lot of labels send, like prefer to master their own tracks, because they want the levels to actually feel similar to the other tracks that they are releasing. It was especially important for this compilation because there was like a bunch of remixes coming out, so they wanted like the levels to all sound quite similar. I have like, I think there was like one or two tracks where I did send it off to get mixed, but I don't, I guess like to me personally, like that can get really expensive, and I just don't think that's like a viable option long term. Like I think you're better off like learning how to do that. I mean, you can always ask for mixing feedback, and like, again, take the track to a friend's place, you know, like have them show you mixing techniques. I think that's really helpful too. But yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Do you have any mixing tips for getting drums and bass, or kick specifically, to work better for a track?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think like one of the most important things I learned from a friend of mine is just like, just very basic, like without getting super technical, is just to make sure like the kick and the bass are just not fighting with each other space-wise. I think that's just like really easy to think about. Like if you just, you know, if you even just like go in here and like you look at like the melody, you can see like there's space, right, for the kick. And I think that's super important because that's where you don't want like these two elements fighting for like the same low end and like the same space. So I think like very basically when you're writing a bass, like make sure you're kind of like writing around the kick a little bit. I think there are advanced techniques to like, you know, really make sure the kick and bass are working together, but that's what really helped me is just like make life easier for yourself and don't try to, you know, make sure like they're not clashing melodically. So that's one thing I would really add. Compressor, LFO, those are two techniques I use as well, just, you know, to add some groove and make sure that the bass and the kick are giving each other breathing room. Oh, we're at time. Okay, I've been told to wrap up. So thank you so much. I mean, you know, yeah. Feel free to DM me on Instagram or something. I'm happy to stay in touch. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to chat.
And next we have the panel. So come on up, panelists. She has toured extensively across the US and Europe, performed at South by Southwest and Vans Warped Tour, and has been featured by NPR, Spin Magazine, LA Weekly, and more. She's collaborated with many industry figures, and she also worked as an assistant engineer at the Foo Fighters studio. And
Sorry, there's like music playing. I don't know where it's coming from.
cut the music.
Is it coming from my laptop?
Maybe.
That's weird. Where is it coming
Is it distracting?
I mean, yeah. Thanks.
Yay, thank you.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
All good. So we have AKKI, we have Vanessa, and this is Carolyn. And Carolyn is the leader of SoundGirls here in New York. She's a freelance live sound engineer, a musician, and an educator based in New York. She specializes in FOH and systems engineering, and she has toured internationally with artists including Matchbox 20, Michael Bublé, and Meet Me at the Altar. She's been the chapter lead of SoundGirls for 6 years, 4 in Pittsburgh and 2 here in New York City. And in her latest venture to push for accessible education, she has taken over as editor-in-chief of Live Sound International, a long-standing pro audio publication. She is also a bass music producer and a flautist. Give it up for the panelists today. So I'm going to start off with a simple question for all of you. I'm wondering what first drew you to this crazy music industry?
I started as a musician, started as a classically trained flautist, and that path has taken me in a lot of different directions and has always guided me, and I still play flute all the time. But I think, what drew me to music is the authenticity and the expression of art and yourself. And then I've just gotten really fascinated with like the manipulation of technology to make art. So all of my hobbies and all of my careers and all of the things that I've done have been very locked into like using technology to create art. And that's why I'm still here today.
Excuse me, my voice is coming back. When I was younger, I grew up in Hawaii, and I heard Nirvana in the back of my friend's dad's truck, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And yeah, and I was always really interested in being an artist and recording and moving to LA. So, and here I am 25 years later.
I would say I got into house music mainly in like 2013, 2014. There was like a really good wave of music that came out, and there was just like such a cool underground community that just became like a lifestyle for me. So I definitely started out as a bit more of just a fan, a listener. I mean, I'm still a fan, obviously, of the music. And then, yeah, eventually I was like, I really want to DJ and be able to create these spaces for people. So that's how I ended up here.
I'm curious for all of you, you've had a lot of experience in this industry and had a specific journey. How has that path been different than maybe you expected in the beginning when you were getting into this?
That's a great question. When I first wanted to get into music, I was told that I had to have a backup plan. And that's kind of like, a lot of our parents' generation, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that's kind of like, you don't really, like, I think going into it back when I first started, it was way more traditional. And people weren't entrepreneurs and you couldn't make a living from your phone. So it was very traditional. And I feel lucky because I was in a transition of just a lot of my generation, us sitting in this room, we think differently than how our parents' generation and the choices were. So this looks very different, and it will continue to look different. Success means different things to different people, and also our ways of receiving success or being successful is so alternative. There's so many ways to do it these days without just having a label or like touring. You can do so many things. So I feel like it's unfolded so magically.
Yeah, I think it's been a really unexpected journey. Like when I first started, I was just like, I want to play clubs. I want to play clubs. I'm just playing as many clubs as possible, many parties as possible. Wednesday night, Tuesday night, like I'm there. And I feel like my journey kind of, then when I switched more into production, I realized that I really had to take a step back from gigs. Like I work a day job as well. So I'm like, to balance like day job and DJing and production was just getting a lot. And I didn't think that I would be taking a step back from DJing and be focusing a bit more production. But like here I am. And I think that's just been really different from where I started out and where I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to be like trying to tour a lot and everything. And I realized how much maybe that's like eventually a priority, but not as much a priority for me right now. So that's been the biggest change.
Yeah, I think I thought I was going to be like more singular in my path over the years, but I think like as I started touring, mixing front of house a lot, and kind of just got opportunities to start teaching in different ways, and found that like I really, really enjoy that aspect of doing audio as well, of like more on the academic side and like writing curriculum and stuff like that. And it just like led to more and more opportunities, and until I got into this world where I'm doing like editor stuff, and my path has really just like diverged into a lot of different directions that I never really expected, but it all came out of my love for playing flute and then engineering, and then it just kept like kind of rolling and spiraling into like different interests and different things. And it's been like a really fun journey, and who knows what I'll be doing in 10 years, because it looks really different than it did 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's what's so fun about the music industry is like you never know where you're going to be, and there's just so many different angles and things you can pursue. It's so awesome. I'm wondering too, within one of your roles, whether that's producer, DJ, audio engineer, what's something about your role that people are typically surprised by when you tell them?
I do everything. I don't know. Like, I just think I will never forget like being an artist in LA, and like I also always had a strong interest in A&R and recording, and I really felt pulled towards all these things. And I really would say it's like I was told to like pick one thing, and I just think can you repeat the question?
Something that people are typically surprised about.
So in terms of being surprised, I think like when people say follow your heart, it literally means like do not listen to other people's opinions. And I feel like that, I remember hearing that when I was younger, and it kind of didn't make sense till I kind of got further in my career, specifically around, you know, when it was like, I was told, you know, Vanessa, you really got to pick one thing, but you know what? You're an idiot if you're, you know, gonna be stuck doing one thing and not give yourself knowledge and power to be able to make it all work as you grow. And now more than ever, as we all know, you know, it's like if you don't have the funds for certain things. I mean, I remember when I was younger, just briefly, you know, it's like I didn't have the money to make a website. Websites used to be thousands of dollars. So I would teach myself HTML, you know, and just like you were saying earlier, you know, I had this idea about how I heard my music being mixed or how other artists should sound. So I was like, I need to teach myself how to do that and be able to do that so I don't have to spend the money on it, but just make it possible for myself and other people.
Yeah, I'll add to that in that like people might be surprised of like how much learning I'm always doing. Like I don't really like get comfortable because like especially with like doing audio, it's like you get really comfortable, you know, on one console and then, you know, you get thrown into something you've never used before or, you know, you get thrown into a role you didn't expect and you know, especially with how quickly technology is evolving, like there's always something to be learning. There's always new technology to adapt to. So it's never like, oh, I learned this job and now I'm going to do this for 20 years. Like a lot of different careers, it's just kind of constant evolving, constant learning. And if you're not, you know, interested in learning, like it's going to be I think anywhere in the industry, it's going to be tough because there's always new stuff to learn.
I think the thing that people get surprised by is the fact that I have a day job as well. I think I've had people like talk to me after shows and they think I'm like, you know, like just touring through New York or like this is my full-time thing. And it's like, no, there's like a whole other life that I have to manage around this. And it's always quite jarring when I'm going from like one to the other. But I think that's what people, it obviously makes sense, but it's like, I think that's what people, you know, find surprising.
Yeah. Question for Carolyn. Through your work with SoundGirls, what do you see as the biggest barriers preventing women from entering audio careers?
Yeah, I think the barriers are similar in a lot of marginalized communities of like there are these like blanket things of like societal barriers, there are financial barriers, there are geographical barriers, and like by looking at those types of things and figuring out how to overcome that, we'll like see more diversity in the industry. So like creating accessible education, live streaming education like we are now so that people who aren't based in New York City get access to that. And, you know, creating organizations like SoundGirls or Support Women DJs where we're creating a space where people aren't under that societal expectation of performing a certain way and like giving them a space to like be mediocre while they're learning and giving them that space where they're not feeling like they have to have a ton of pressure on their shoulders, I think is something that can have a really big impact and just creating a more welcoming environment where we feel like we can walk in the room and not feel like ashamed or, you know, feel nervous that we have to be up to a certain level just because we're, carrying the weight of all women, on our shoulders or something like that.
Yeah, I like the point about like being able to be mediocre and not be perfect in a space. I think that's a big reason why open decks have become so popular with Support Women DJs. We have one every single week because it really is just a safe space so that you can mess up and it's not a big deal. So yeah, I completely agree. Question for AKKI specifically. As an artist and producer, how did you develop confidence in your own creative voice?
Honestly, I think it was just like taking risks and the confidence kind of catches up. It's like you have to just put yourself out there, and like the more you practice, I think the more confidence you get. Because I feel like, if you're just waiting to feel ready, it almost is like that moment never comes. Like you just kind of have to put yourself out there, like learn, and then, learn from what you did well, learn from what could have done better, and then confidence over time just gets stronger. So I think that is true for both DJing and production. I think like when I did one of my first tracks and I just started sending them out, like, because you just never know what could come back. And then they ended up getting signed to good labels, and I did not expect that. But I think like it took a bit of time to, get the nerve to actually do that and like put myself out there. But I've learned over time that like perfection is the enemy of good, as you were kind of saying. And it's good to just like good enough is good enough and just like roll with that, and the confidence will come.
Yeah, taking risks, having audacity, because men have audacity, so we need 100%. To as well. Yes. I'm curious, question for all of you is, how do you feel that the industry has changed since you've started?
I feel like we're so lucky. I do feel like I lean in seeing the cup half full. I feel like there's so many women out there. I know so many female producers. I know so many female engineers. And I feel like now more than ever, there's so many opportunities to do things. You can do so many things on your own. And that industry change has been wonderful. And I just feel like the best opportunities I ever got were from myself and not from a rep. And I feel like it's like we're evolving. It is the Wild West. And people who say it's one way, I am telling you it's bullshit.
Yeah, so how things have changed. I guess just adding on to what Vanessa said, it's like the access to information and technology has evolved so much, and like we all have the ability to, go online and learn things, just like, there's really not that barrier, that there used to be. We don't have to go to the library and get a textbook. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming, and there's also a lot of like misinformation out there. So you got to weed through all of the nonsense. But, I think having like some trusted resources, like it's a whole new world where we can like, it's crazy like listening to some producers who are like really well known. They're in their 20s and they're like, yeah, I've been doing this since I was 12. And it's like I maybe us, like, people in their 30s, like that's the first generation that we actually had. Like we had Fruity Loops when we were, 11 on the computer. But like now, you imagine what the kids are working on. They've got GarageBand on their computers now. So, it's just a whole new world of access to technology that, we're seeing all these new skills and all these new things come out of that. It's really cool.
I would say I feel like the way we find and listen to music has changed a lot. Like when I first started releasing music, it was more the hype machine era, and like getting a track big meant you got blogs to write about it, and it was like, you could get a track big by just putting it on SoundCloud and just like have it like be trending on Hype Machine, or just like sending it to like friends and whatnot. And I think a lot of that's changed with obviously social media and content and TikTok, but also just Spotify is like a whole different game, obviously one of the dominant players now. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely changed how you strategize when it comes to releasing music and like marketing music. There's so much more emphasis on things like playlisting, for example, which weren't as big of a thing. But I think the thing that hasn't changed is just like making music to connect with people. I think it's just about the different platforms and making sure you're kind of like evolving with that.
Yeah. Collaboration is such a big part of what we do in all of our roles. I'm curious if you can speak to what makes someone a great collaborator, great to work with, whether it's in the studio or backstage. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I always say, like when I'm teaching classes, that the most important thing is not like having the knowledge, because there's always knowledge we won't have, but it's just having that drive, like especially in live sound, you know, like having people whose attitude is they want the show to go off without a hitch and be as smooth as possible. Like that attitude is like the most important thing. And I think in any role, like even as a performer or as, you know, a studio engineer, like you having that attention to detail and making sure like when you see something's going wrong, that you're on top of it, that you really want to see things go well. That's the most important thing. Like I'd rather have someone helping me out on stage that has that attitude and knows nothing than someone who knows everything and just like doesn't care that much. So like I think it's really important to like go into things and be like you're never going to have all the knowledge, you're never going to necessarily feel like an expert, but like having that good energy and knowing when to ask questions and not just like, you know, do whatever, but like making sure that you're doing the right thing to make sure that the show is going well is really the most important thing.
I would say as a producer, as an engineer, as a mixer and mastering engineer, when I'm working with artists, you know, I've heard a lot of stories that artists shared with me about producers, you know, arguing with the artists, not letting them take the track or arguing about decision making. And as a collaborator, to me, when I'm not the artist in that role, to be a good collaborator, I feel like, is to help support the artist. So if I'm suggesting advice, you know, to be collaborative is always to be open and lay out ideas. And it's about supporting the other creator. And if you're in a writing, you know, scenario, it's like the point is that two ideas is better than one. And, you know, just hearing other people's perspective. And for as long as I've been in music and like recording and all this stuff, I still learn stuff every day. I remember maybe a few months ago, I was like, oh my God, I've been doing that wrong for like 10 years. Like, oops. But the thing is, especially in recording, like no one ever made something or created something successfully by being being safe. Like most pioneer engineers, like they experimented. So yeah, there's rules, but like when you collaborate, don't be afraid to try things and to be open and listen and, you know, work with whoever you're working as an equal.
Yeah, I totally second that. I think like I've collaborated with a few people lately on productions, and I think it's like so important to just have good chemistry out of the studio. The people I collaborate with a lot now tend to be my friends first, and then we get into the studio and it's just fun. And then when you have that fun energy, that's when you can be creative and like be yourself. And I think it's important to collaborate with people that you feel safe with. And sometimes it's just not a fit, and that's okay. Like I've also had collab experiences like years ago where mid collab I decided to stop collaborating with this person because they just like, you know, were not really very receptive to my ideas, and it just didn't feel like a fit. My friend and I just finished a track together, and one thing we did when we collabed, which I think was a really fun technique, was like they were on Ableton for 10 minutes and then I was on Ableton for 10 minutes. So we kind of just like did like a back and forth, and like the track just truly felt like the intersection of both of us. So yeah, I think chemistry is super important, and just like having fun with the right person.
Thank you. I want to talk about mentorship as well. I'm curious if any of you have had a mentor, and if you think that, you know, you really recommend for someone to find a mentor to help you in your journey.
I'll just say I've had so many people who've helped me on my journey, and like I was the in-house assistant engineer at the Foo Fighters studio, And I mean, I worked for Dr. Luke and a lot of other people who honestly, just say like were so kind in giving me opportunity. And in return, I've been part of SoundGirls. I've had interns. I've hired people. I've referred people. I think we are a community and we are here together. It's not one person who's going to change the world with music. It's all of us together. And I think it's so important to be a mentor, to learn. Like, I mean, I've hired a career coach before. I've also I advise people on their careers. So I think it's very circular. And, even the biggest people in the music industry need advice. Even, everybody who has it figured out sometimes needs help. So I think it's so important to play both roles.
Yeah, so I have had a lot of folks like believe in me and give me opportunities and give me chances. I will say I've never had like a specific mentor in my life or in my career, but it's something that I felt very early on like I wanted to do for other people. I think a lot of the things that I do now are like things that like I really wish, existed 10 years ago for me. And so I don't think it's like necessary to have a mentor. But I think that it's such a powerful way to learn from others and to support others. And honestly, like the number one way that I learn is by being a teacher and by being a mentor. And it is very, very circular in that way. But yeah, finding folks that you trust, like having phone a friend, type of people who like you get into a hitch and, you need to find your way out of a problem, like having those types of people is really, really valuable.
Yeah, I totally second that phone a friend thing. I have a mentor that I try to meet with maybe once or twice a month. He definitely like helps teach me production techniques, but it's not even just about that. He definitely just like helps me think about career goals and just kind of helps me get out of my head. And I think that's been very helpful because otherwise I feel like, sometimes it can be very isolating to work on this, right? If you're like just in the studio all weekend, you sometimes just need someone to gut check you and just like reality check you and tell you like you're doing great. It's not a race, it's a journey. So I find that really helpful. And then I also find it helpful to, as you were saying, like mentor other people as well to kind of just like pay it forward, right? And just, put the positive energy out there.
Yeah. On a similar note, I'm curious if you've ever gotten a piece of advice that really struck you and even changed the trajectory of where you were going.
I mean, I said this before, but like listen to your heart. I mean, sometimes people aren't going to agree with choices that you want to make. I mean, I'll just give you just a very brief example. I moved to LA because I wanted to tour. And during my journey, like I wanted to tour and like get signed. In my journey, I started a label. I started recording and being an artist. And then I realized one day that I just wanted to tour. And so I just started touring. And and I was homeless. And I had to kind of like ignore what people said. I mean, I was playing like on the average every other day, like 100, 200 shows like a year. So the reason why I'm saying this is that, again, listen to your heart. Don't listen to, you kind of know what's best for yourself, and you have to learn to trust your intuition. And it's not always easy because it's really noisy, especially in our technology-filled world we're living in. But that is the one piece of advice that I just remember hearing since the beginning from so many different people. And I feel like I really understand what that is now. And you have to listen to your own heart.
I feel like the feisty side of me wants to like think of people who like told me not to, like people who were like, telling me that I wouldn't be able to do this, I wouldn't be able to tour, for whatever reasons, and like that really, really lit a fire under me to do it. So that was definitely like a piece of advice, you could say. But also, like, I think one thing that's not like necessarily advice that was given to me, but something that like I feel like I've learned over, 10 plus years of working in the industry is like to focus on things that like truly excite me and fulfill me. Maybe you guys are familiar with like the trope of like the grumpy sound guy of like, and I'm sure as DJs, you guys all know as well of like, people who just like aren't happy to be there for whatever reasons, a lot of sound engineers. But I think it's important to not burn yourself out, especially when you're working in such a like passion of yours, whatever that may be. Like it's really easy to like work and like just completely burn out. I've definitely done that in various capacities. And I try really hard not to be that person. And I do that by like following things that truly fulfill me and excite me, and working with artists who I really believe in, and working with people who I really believe in. Working for people who respect me has been a big thing that I've had to work really hard on, because it's so draining, especially when you're so passionate about your job, to work in a disrespectful situation or something that like just really is draining your soul. And so finding those things that like really make you excited to wake up in the morning, I think is really important.
I think the best piece of advice I got was from a major artist one time that I opened for, and he said to keep your blinders on. And I thought that was really interesting because it was all about just like, filtering out the noise, especially when it comes to production. A lot of people think about how do you make a track that's going to go big on an algorithm and things like that. And I think that type of advice really helped me to just focus on what I want to do, like filter out the noise. There's just I think you were saying this as well, there's just so many distractions out there now. And like, you just got to do what feels right for you. And to like, just because someone else is doing it a certain way doesn't mean it's the way that you need to do it. So like filter out the noise, like don't compare yourself, just like keep your blinders on and, focus on your journey.
Don't listen to the hate comments. They're all losers.
1000%.
Little story time would love to have about what's a mistake that you made earlier in your career that you learned a lot from.
Oh, just circle back to me.
I feel like, I'm not necessarily looking back on things as like, this was a mistake, I regret doing it. I think a mistake as far as like, I definitely learned a lot, but definitely taking on way too much, especially like in touring, it's like very easy because they'll be like, you mix front of house and tour manage and drive the van and do merch. And, in that realm, it's very easy to take on too much. But I also tend to have my hands in a lot of things. Stretching myself too thin, and then it's all things that I really, really care about. So I get like really stressed out and anxious about everything. And, that's something that I've really, really, like, I think, my favorite word is balance, because I am always trying to find that balance with work-life balance, but also all the different things that I'm doing. And so trying not to stretch yourself too thin and finding the right balance of like, what's good for your health and your mental health, your physical health, but also, making sure you're progressing in the way you want to.
Ready? You want to go for a second? I know we've been kind of circling around this one, but I think honestly, just like having too much of a perfectionist mindset, I think is something it still happens, but I think that was like a learning experience. Like just, I think some of my first tracks, like I was spending months, years on them, and they were probably fine to go like 20 versions before that. And I think just like trying not to just, like good enough, again, like I said, like good enough is good enough, and just like putting yourself out there a bit faster, I think could have benefited me a bit more, but it's all a learning experience. So
I will say, on that note, every mistake that you make, it's like one door closes, another door opens. I've been fired, luckily not too many times. But those, really hard moments led me somewhere else. And I think all the mistakes they're growing opportunities. And I think the mistake that you make is, again, going back, is listening to other people. You know, it's like everybody is looking to find the quickest way to be successful and whatever that is to their individual mind and chasing stuff. I just would say the mistake would be chasing other people's dreams. Chase your own dream. And also, it's hard. I would say I've managed a lot of artists. I've supported a lot of artists. It's been hard. It's been a hard mistake on my part when I've shown up and cared more than other people. And so I think that you have to learn how, you know, not to, I think, put your energy in certain areas when it's not kind of balanced. And that is a hard mistake to learn. It's just a hard thing in general to always see and know. You know, it's every experience is unto its own, you know. But I just, again, would encourage you to, like, be very intuitive in your growth.
And then on the flip side of the mistakes, I'd love for you to share a moment where you just felt really proud in your career, where you're like, wow, I did that. I did that.
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is honestly, like, within education of, like, I've done a lot of, like, curriculum development and teaching of live sound engineering, and honestly just seeing people working, doing this for a career that, like, came out of initially, like, my program has been, like, the most powerful feeling. Yeah.
I think honestly for me, it's been releasing music with my own vocals. I mean, it's something that I only started doing over the past year, and it's like been like my little girl dream. So I think just like looking at that and like hearing my own vocals in a club with my own production is just like still kind of surreal, and like something that I'm getting used to and feeling quite proud of recently.
I love that, and I'm gonna say that as a artist and a producer and a mixer and an engineer, when I've done everything from start to finish, I felt proud of myself for not asking other people for advice on stuff, but just like really like trusting myself in my own ears, because it's really can be hard. But I've felt very proud of myself in moments when I've just completed things on my own. I also think, again, there's a great art to collaborating and having community. Throughout my career, I've had moments I definitely feel proud. You know, there's been moments where I didn't wait for anybody else and I just said, fuck it, this is my dream and I'm going to do this. And, you know, being on tour or starting my own label. And I think when you do things yourself and you work really hard and the return is like, I don't know, like I've had like a regular job for so long. I never know how much money I'm going to make every month. And that's the risk I'm willing to take because I love music so much. So that's pretty rewarding.
That's real. That's so real. And then the last topic I want to ask you about before we open it up for Q&A, so think about some questions you have, is around community. You know, it's such a buzzword that people use, but I think today is definitely a testament of community. We have folks from SoundGirls and the Support Women DJs community here together, and it's so cool to have this collaboration come together. And I'm curious for the panelists of if you just have any advice for community building for everyone, whether that means your own fan base as an artist or your community in the industry and the people that you surround yourself with.
Something that's been helping me build community is I actually work with an organization called Change the Beat. I'm like the New York ambassador and collaborated with Rachel actually last year, and we did a workshop where we had promoters from the local scene as panelists. We did like an A&R track feedback session. So I think things like that where you feel like you have the resources to put together something like that that's like helpful for people and actually like brings people together, I think is like a really great way to build community. It's a lot of work, I'm not gonna lie, but I don't even think you have to do it that often. Like I think, you know, starting your own thing can be super powerful, as long as you can be somewhat consistent with it. So that's some advice I would give.
Yeah, I would say, I was actually talking to Aki about this earlier. I think it's important to not feel like you have to be an expert to teach and share with others. You know, like when I started teaching, I certainly was not like at the top of my game in engineering, but it was a matter of like I was doing this job that other people wanted to know how to do. And I still certainly don't feel like an expert at anything, but, you know, I think that the skill share and, you know, just getting rid of like the gatekeeping mindset is really, really valuable to just, you know, sit down and be like, yeah, I'll help someone out. And also just like not being afraid to just support other people, I think is really like obviously the basis of community. But sometimes, you know, it does feel very isolating. Like as a music producer, like you're just sitting in your room all the time, your studio all the time and playing shows, you know, it can be a bit isolating to just like be the one on stage or the one, you know, on this journey. So yeah, just not being afraid to go out and just like support your friends. And, you know, it costs nothing to share their post or their flyer. And, you know, showing up for others is really like the key to building your own community as well.
I always really liked this movie from the 90s called Field of Dreams. And there's a quote from it, and it's, if you build it, they will come. And I think that, like, if you want something, create it. I think it's really that simple, and also help other people. When people talk about gatekeeping, I'm like, I kind of think it's in some ways almost funny because I'm like, you know what? I don't see this at all because guess what? I'm the one who's going to be able to have access to everything. And I take that perspective because instead of looking outside to A&Rs, to booking agents, to all these different people who had the like answer or key, I was like, no, I'm going to create it, and I'm going to create it for my friends or the other artists that I believe in. And so if you have friends out there or a music community that you're wanting to build or start creating, it's like build that for yourself and believe in yourself that you can do that. I think it's really simple, and now more than ever, we have the opportunity to do that. And also, it's so cool. We're in a we're in a room full of the majority is women. There's like the question of like not being a lot of women. We're here, and just it's like we all can make tons of records here. Like we could do tons of tours. I mean, there's so many answers just next door to us. So I'm just as in empowering. Take it in your own hands.
Vanessa, I think you need to be a motivational speaker as well.
I'm ready.
So
Real
who has some questions? Yes, go ahead.
In terms of building community, as an artist myself, I have seen things become increasingly harder as I have found myself visibly marginalized, like, and seeing kind of the attitudes and receptiveness of others when trying to build community change and become a little bit more difficult. So what advice would you give to an artist who is visibly marginalized, who is looking to build community and finding it a little difficult to be given a chance?
I have a question. What's the chance you're trying to get?
Just like friends or collaborators or opportunities.
Okay. You know what? We're in a room of people right now. I would like to ask everyone at the end of this to communicate with her. And like let's like try and help out And I mean, I would say this too. It's like creating like some sort of like meetup. I mean, something that, you know, we do with SoundGirls is there is a monthly meetup with an opportunity to meet people. And I think takes time to meet people, and relationships take time and nurturing and care. But when you do find people, continue to connect with them. I have coffee with people all the time, and I try and talk to people all the time. And we are in this room, and if you can start small, just with one person, that'll make such a difference. It's better to have a few people that you can fit on your hand that are true and like genuinely you connect with than a gazillion. I don't know if that helps, but I hope it does. Yeah.
No, I think just adding to that, like, I think starting small is just key, because sometimes when you think of community, you're immediately like, oh, it has to be like hundreds and hundreds of people. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be a group chat with you and like 2 other girls in the community, right? And like you guys grab coffee every few weeks, or you FaceTime or something. Like I think it can just start small and like build over time. You could go to events together, and it doesn't have to be that many people. It could just be like 3 or 4 people that you feel connected to, and that just like expands gradually. So I'm sorry you're going through that, by the way, but I hope, as you were saying, like events like this can really help.
Yeah, and also I'll just add, you know, like on my musical journey, like just felt like that for years, honestly, of just like feeling very isolated. And I think like one thing that's come out of me just being authentic and just doing the thing and by myself has been like a few like key supporters that have just like shown up in my life. It took years, but those people like are my driving force with like making music. So just keep being authentic and doing yourself, you know, and you'll find the right people for sure.
Yes. Is that Nina back there?
Going back to the topic of mentorship a little bit, and about like, I guess, as someone who's kind of also starting like the production journey, like having gone through a little bit of the DJing, but starting production, also looking for mentors who are also women, kind of like guiding and leading in the music direction and in the music industry, who have an understanding of it. I guess, what would your advice be on seeking out like certain mentors like this, and like finding kind of like the right fit of someone who's like maybe not necessarily your style like with music per se, but like resonates with you and is someone who you feel like can really give you the right types of like advice and like help you build up your career in a way. And even if you call it a coach, even that's fine too.
So advice on finding a mentor within music production specifically?
Production, and also like career trajectory, and
Mm-hmm.
like how to navigate some of those things if you're like totally new to it, basically.
So I think it can take some time. Shout out Sound Collective. There's classes here you can go to. But I think it like, you know, takes some time to find like the right production mentor. I think like Instagram is honestly a great channel if there's like someone that you like and that you follow and that you kind of just want to get in touch with. I think that's like a really good route. I think obviously events like this, but you might need to, you know, work with a few people before you find someone that you actually vibe with, and find someone that you feel like, you know, it's important, I think, to have chemistry with a mentor as well. I feel like I went through a few production mentors over the years. Like I think I went through at least like 2 or 3, and then I finally found one who lived kind of close by to me, which was a huge plus, because like, you know, it just made it so much more accessible and like easy for me to just go over. But I think just kind of was very encouraging and like able to really yes and me and like kind of understand my vision and like coach me in the right way. So yeah, I think it's like reaching out to people in your network, like resources like right here, and then just like, again, trying a few before you find the right one.
One thing I always tell people is just like not to be afraid to send an email. Like some people are a lot more accessible than they seem, you know? So sometimes, you know, it's literally just a matter of like, I love this person's production. Let me just email them, and maybe they never answer, but they often will. So I'm a big fan of cold emailing people.
Yeah, I would say, like I had mentioned this before, some of my biggest successes had been because I cold emailed people or just reached out. And nowadays, people use a lot of AI, so make it super personal and don't put any dashes. Um, also, LinkedIn's great. Like, I've had a few different coaches in my career, but I've also had, you know, different people who I worked for. And I think, again, it might take a few people to learn from. And also, I don't know, like, once you take, it depends what type of learner you are, which is probably something helpful to figure out. I know for myself, when I was learning guitar or like learning recording, I learned a few things right away and then I just ran with it. And it's like repetition, just practicing, and it takes time. And like, a good way to learn, I think, is, you know, if there's other artists who, you know, who need recordings, you know, just say, hey, can I experiment or help you out? Because it's like you guys are creating community and like working together. But yeah, relationships again take time, but don't be afraid to reach out. A lot of people are accessible through DM, Instagram, you know, LinkedIn. You can get access to a lot of emails these days too.
Aaliyah?
It's hard. I'm not gonna lie, it's challenging. I think I try to think about it as like sustenance over speed. So it's like what is like sustainable for you that you can actually keep up with on a week to week basis. Also give yourself some grace. You know, if you're working a day job that's really hard and it's like a stressful time, then maybe there's days or, you know, a week where you probably can't do too much in music, and then the next week you can make up for it. I try to do like a recalibration session with myself every weekend and just think about like, okay, what are my goals for this week, and like what do I need to make time for, and then like what are my easy daily wins. And sometimes an easy win is like sending an invoice. Like it can be something like really simple. If there's like 2 or 3 things I can just knock out. Sometimes like if it's like production itself, I actually find it helpful to even make just a little bit of progress on a track and just kind of be very focused on what that could be. Like, is it, I'm just going to fix the bass line when I get home and spend like 30 minutes on it. And then maybe you'll end up spending like 2 hours. So, you know, I think it's just like setting very realistic goals for yourself, because if you just tell yourself like, I'm going to get home and produce, it's like a little too open-ended sometimes, like for your brain's like, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to be on the couch. So that's what I would advise. Just like set very realistic goals for yourself.
I'm super motivated. So when I think about music, I love it so much that I kind of treat it like when I'm producing artists, or I do a lot of content, or, you know, there's a few other miscellaneous things that I do, but I've always kind of balanced between doing business at certain times, like artist development or consulting or label stuff, recording, and then being an artist. And at certain times, I've been a full-time artist, and then the recording and the business have been, you know, like 25%, and then it's swapped. So right now, I treat like recording other artists and doing content and some of these other artist development stuff that I do as my day job. And at night, I work on my own music. And I just, I'm kind of crazy and like, I don't know what to say. Sometimes I go to bed pretty late because like I'm working on stuff and that's what I'm excited about. But I do take time off and I think it's very important. I think self-care is underestimated and, I think scheduling, I do a calendar and that is really helpful. I have experimented with time blocking. Sometimes that helps for certain people. And I do have designated times for social media and like creating. And I think like abiding by that. I personally, since I've been my own boss for a long time, I don't have an issue with it. But, I think it's leaning into whatever brings you joy and motivates you has to be like a driving factor in order for you to complete things. But going back to what she was saying just briefly is even if you can do one small thing, especially if you're exhausted, because I know a lot of other artists who talk about that. And at the end of the day, you will ask yourself what you care about the most, and that'll determine what you do.
I think one thing that's like really helped me is like not having an all or nothing mindset. And really just, I see we're supposed to wrap up here, but just not being too hard on yourself, because if you want to do it for fun, like just let yourself not do it for a while. And also finding that hump where like you feel the reward of the work you've done, I think like is a big factor of like, finally feeling like it's fun, which takes a while of whatever work you're doing, of, putting in the work to the point where you're like, okay, this is like, I'm in the groove now. Takes a while. But once you get there, it starts to feel less like work and just, don't put so much pressure on yourself, I guess.
Also, we're a grain of sand floating in space. I mean, like, I don't know. Take that in.
Can you give it up for all of our amazing panelists? So that wraps up our time for today, everyone. I would like to ask if maybe we could get a group picture. If everyone wants to like come to the front and I can give one of y'all a camera, that would be really cute. And yeah, we do have to be out of here at 8:45. So that gives us 14 minutes.